Hey everybody, welcome to the Free Mind Podcast.
Are the stars out tonight? I don't know if it's cloudy or bright.
All right, we got a special episode today, babe. But before we jump in, I want to share just something awesome that happened just this past week. One of our listeners reached out to us, and we've been talking a lot on the podcast, like where do we go from here? How do we, not just complain about all the foolishness that's going on, but what do we do to start heading in the right direction? Well, I found out that one of our listeners has been doing something, working on this for like a year and a half, and I wanted to share it with you guys, and it's called mudhenmama.com, mudhenmama.com. If you are watching here, I'll show you, mudhenmama.com. And what she's got here is she has curated a whole library of books broken down into age groups. So we've been talking about, I think the enemy knows that to really make his agenda go through, he's trying to capture the minds of our kids, right? And so he said the first thing we can do is get them out of government schools. But we realize that not everybody can do that right away. But one of the things we can make a difference on is we can start reading some of these books together as families, talking through these things, protecting our kids. This is one thing she said: protect your kids against the prevailing culture with books that align with your values, and shop in MHM books. So I want to encourage you to go there even now. Hop on that website, and if you can, put in Free Mind on the code. It'll let them know that you heard about it through this podcast, and it'll also give you a discount. We can all use a discount with these $6 eggs right now. Can I get an amen? So go on and hop on there, and actually one of the books that I'm going to be using today in this podcast, she has it up there. So I would say if this book is interesting to you, which I think it should be, I think it will be, hop on there and get it, and I'll show you how to do that here in a little bit. So what are we going to talk about today, babe?
Yeah, what do you want to talk about? What's on the agenda?
Well, so I sent out a Instagram little story just asking people, like, did they want us to talk on the Grammys?
Oh.
And oddly enough, I got mixed feedback.
Yeah.
So like half the people were like, yeah, please do. Half the people were like, nah, we don't care about it. And and a few things right in between.
I'm just kidding.
So my granddad, he used to have this saying. So my granddad's from the country, y'all. Nervous laughing because she loves Duck Dynasty. I say, you ain't got to watch Duck Dynasty. Let's just go down to Lake Wells, down to Uncle Bud's RV park and hang out with Granddad.
It's a true place, y'all. It's a real thing.
It's a real thing. So he used to have these sayings. He always had these sayings that I love. But if he didn't like a preacher, he'd say, boy, I would walk out my back door to hear that boy preach.
He wouldn't.
He can't preach worth a puke. That's what he'd say. Puke. And so, when somebody asked me if I watched the Grammys,
that
basically that's what comes to mind. Boy, I would walk out my back door to watch that.
You wouldn't walk out your living room.
Because seriously, like at this point, I think I lost interest in the Grammys years ago.
Oh yeah, I remember being over a friend's house in Chicago. I don't think it was the Grammys, but it was another kind of award show on, some kind of music award show. And it had been some years since I had watched that because, entertainment had just taken a turn, but I was convinced at that point, like, this is trash.
Yeah.
It's a cesspool of what they would call art, but I wouldn't call it art. Or maybe bad art.
Yeah, so why would we want to go subject ourselves to the ignorant screeds of this class of people that are yelling about us about foolishness that they have no basis to say,
man.
And then passing off this art that basically makes you think of Duchamp's fountain. It's a urinal that's meant to be music, and so. And that kind of joke, because every now and then there's something dope, right? There's something that actually qualifies as excellent musically. Every now and then, like the bad part about the further you get from the Christian worldview, the worse the art actually gets, because it has an impact. Like when you start to not see beauty as beauty, you get Duchamp's fountain. Like you get these foolish. You get the banana that was taped to the wall, and they're like, "Ooh, that's subversive." And so I do find that a lot of modern pop music, every now and then I'll be like, oh, okay, that's a cool melody, or that's hooky, or that's, that's unique production. But it's like, I don't often come across something that's like, man, this is going to be classic. Like, this is going to last for years. This is because this has substance. More so, it's just kind of trendy fluff that's ear candy. And so, I haven't watched Grammys. I have no interest in watching the Grammys. And it's not even because I'm like mad at it. There's that too, but it's like evil becomes banal after a while, right? It's just, it becomes boring.
Yeah.
And then what's meant to shock ceases to shock.
Dang it. Yeah.
And actually, what does shock is something like when Kanye wore the MAGA hat on SNL. Like, that was genuinely shocking.
Right. That's
so
hilarious.
like Fat Satan is not as shocking.
Oh my gosh.
Sorry, I stole that headline. That was a headline from somebody from some news organization.
Jeez Louise.
Called your boy Fat Satan. But it's like, so I understand that people are like, nah, next, like, who cares?
And I was surprised too, because I asked one of my classes, like, hey, who watched the Grammys? And it was just like 2 to 3 kids had made time to watch it. And I would assume that they were all into it, but not even in that demographic, college kids. A lot of them were like, I'm good. I didn't watch it or made.
And I saw the ratings were really low.
Were they?
I was like, woohoo, that's one good thing.
I wondered, okay.
So, I'm sure if you're alive, you've
heard about
seen these come through, the Sam
Clips.
Smith, Kim Petras performance, and just how, he had the devil horns on. It was this transgender, orgy, occult thing. Of course, right after, it was hilarious. In the flames, it says sponsored by Pfizer.
Jeez Louise. If that doesn't make you think and wake up and say, okay, there's truly something going on here.
The only thing
something
missing was a climate change push and a cameo from Zelensky, and we'd have rounded it out. So
yes,
but it is kind of funny. Like there's actually I couldn't find it, but like there's a Martin Luther quote or something. Maybe it's not even real, but. I remember Reformation, not as in the king, not as in the king,
but Martin Luther,
the original.
Okay.
So I heard he said something like, the thing that the devil hates most is to be laughed at, and so, there is that, right?
There is that.
Like at some point, like you have to laugh at his antics, but on the other hand, you don't want to make light of something that could actually have a lot of weight to it, and you don't want to you don't want to completely dismiss it. You want to laugh at it and mock it, like mock it in a godly way, but you don't want to dismiss it and think, oh man, it's no big deal,
right?
Who cares? Because what you got?
Sort of like in C.S. Lewis. I think it's Screw Tapes when he says, the mistake Christians make is either A, thinking there's a demon at every bush and every corner, every turn, and in every situation. And the other mistake is to dismiss it altogether, not acknowledge at all.
And he said that's the two poles he tries. And if you had to guess, like, how would you characterize Western civilization up until maybe the past 20 years?
Jeez.
Which one of those poles? I would say clearly he's taken the route with Western civilization to ignore his existence and act like that the spiritual isn't a category. In other words, we, post-Enlightenment, we've kind of traveled the materialism route and ceased to think of the spiritual realm
is real.
As a real thing. The more because typically, like, Satan and demons were part and parcel of the Christian worldview. So when we cut off basically our roots from the existence of God, that stuff sort of took a back seat, and we thought of it as myth, right? Like the devil is that's kind of a leftover myth from our superstitious age as human beings. Now we can explain it in terms of just, therapy, like it's person's broken psychology, or maybe it was just some natural law we didn't understand. So that's kind of been the trajectory. The new atheism, would have carried the Richard Dawkins, so much so they would even deny the spiritual element of a human being, and you would need to describe and characterize a human being purely in terms of physics and chemistry, and the mind would just be the brain. It would be reduced to the brain.
Wow.
That's kind of the story. But what is interesting enough, like that kind of worldview can't really last for long, which we've mentioned a lot. Like it more creates a vacuum that's something more spiritual. Like metaphysical materialism can't really provide a foundation for human life because it's so eliminates things that we all like. All of life is we're experiencing conscience. We're having conscious experiences. So any worldview that gets rid of consciousness, as a real unified thing, or the soul or the self or morality, or it's not going to be able, you can't build meaning from that because it's inherently a meaningless nihilistic worldview. So enter in this new spiritualism, which is coming to take its place. Interestingly enough, I'll read some of the quotes in this Joe Boot book, where he talks about why that is in Western civilization and how it kind of moved from materialism to pantheism, where all is one, and sort of like how that even begins to walk into the occult.
Wow. And
witch covens. Like this stuff has a coherent pathway to it.
Wow. Well.
And so, there's lots of different ways we could respond to, like, seeing the increasingly overt occultic activity, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know, I couldn't find this clip, but there was this show on Disney, and it's like where the good guys are like doing dark magic and occultic stuff, and it's actual, not like, they used to say the Smurfs was like that too.
Right.
But this is like even more like this is like real type stuff. And so the lady, one of the girls that does the voices is from Parks and Rec.
Of that particular show from Disney, you mean? Okay.
Yes. Okay. And she said in this, this was literally, I saw this with my own, she said, "I love how we're normalizing the occult."
She said that.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so, what you always want to watch for in these situations is like, even though like, okay, we understand like if their aim was merely to shock, they might have been successful in hitting that target because they did get a lot of stir on it. If their only aim is like shock factor, get people to listen to the song, make money, and it's not really that big of a deal. Like the Satan thing is just something that they played up because they know evangelicals and people on the right will overreact and they'll blow it up. If that was their only aim, then yeah, you would still say it wasn't good, but it wouldn't be that bad. But with all the other stuff going on, you begin to wonder, is their aim actually, are they trying to move the Overton window to make the occult normalized? We know that the sexual thing, that's been part of it. And so if you remember back, I think we discussed this book called After the Ball.
Yeah. That
was written by two. I think they were actually homosexual men themselves, but they were definitely involved in the activism. They were trying to describe why the gay movement failed and how they wanted to try to move it forward. Their goal was to basically, in fact, I got I think I pulled it up here. The subtitle was How America Will Conquer Its Fear and Hatred of Gays in the 90s. Wow. And it was written in 89. And they basically went down this path and they nailed it. And how they did it was through this strategy of propaganda.
Okay.
And they said the first step in this was they wanted to desensitize. And so they started that. They said their mistake was being too flamboyant too quick. So we want to make the normal characters and the good guys in the shows, the ones that seem to have it together, make those the homosexual characters. 2 was jamming. You want to make people that respond to that be seen as bigots and old mindset, that kind of thing, particularly Christians. So the Christians they're anti-gay. So you make them look bad. So you had desensitization, jamming, and then conversion. And then conversion basically meant you want to convert the average American emotion, mind, and will through a planned psychological attack in the form of propaganda fed to the nation via the media. In the early stages, this is quote for the book, in the early stages of any campaign to reach straight America, the message should not be shocked and repelled by premature exposure to homosexual behavior itself. Instead, the imagery of sex should be downplayed and gay rights should be reduced to an abstract social question as much as possible. First, let the camel get its nose inside the tent. Jeez. Only later, his unsightly derriere. and that's probably playing off that terminology.
And I think one of the brilliant moves was partnering with the rights, the human rights.
Right.
That it was like similar.
Co-opting civil rights.
So
of the
I
Black
think that was a
community, right?
brilliant move, and because of that, I think even the plight of that became desensitized, and now you don't want to speak out against it because it's like if you speak out against this, you're speaking out against that as well, and they've co-opt that. So I think that was, I looked up and I was like, wait a minute.
Yeah, they ran that playbook.
Is that
and they
how we
ran it
feel?
well.
That's not the same.
Right.
So
yeah, they collapsed those two things in a way that was very, very, very rhetorically persuasive, and I think they have succeeded in making anybody that stands up against that appear as
No
though
doubt about
they're
it.
anti-black or white supremacists in the old school sense, where it really meant something.
For sure.
And so, there's so many angles here to go on, because there is the reality. One listener wrote in to us and asked us to address a couple things, and I'm going to email this person back, because one of them, they were talking about the nature of Satan, and they were asking questions about, was it he the choir director in heaven, and this.
Oh my gosh.
So, and that is
good.
that is a traditional, like, that is the typical evangelical, I think, doctrine of demonology, and Satan would typically tie him. And I can't remember if it's in the book of Ezekiel where the prophet is talking about the king of Tyre. And in some sense, he seems to be talking about Satan as well, because it said you were there in the garden. I honestly haven't done a ton of study on that, so I can't say with any confidence whether he was or not. I do know there's some people within evangelicalism that have disagreed with that as well. Like I was in my William Lane Craig stage for a while. In his Defenders podcast, he talks about that specific topic, and in his view that particular passage couldn't bear the weight of that interpretation. Like he said, it was he said to leap from that to talking about Satan was beyond proper principles of exegesis. But he could be wrong. Like there are I remember seeing things in there that does make you think that he's talking about more than just the king of Tyre. So I don't know. I can't weigh in on that particular. You learned some of that stuff, right, back in the Bethel day.
Satan. No.
But there was a book that I read maybe a few years ago that I found was very interesting, called The Unseen Realm by Michael Heiser, who just recently passed, by the way, which was sad. But anyways, that was one of the more interesting theological books I had read on the topic, where he really discusses the council of heaven in the Old Testament and all these passages that often are mysterious, and he really did a good job of biblically putting it all together. But I don't remember him I can't remember what he said about that topic. So I apologize to the listener that wrote that in. But I would say the second thing she asked was deep, was like, is this common in the industry?
Is what common?
So, like, this satanic element. That's a whole nother podcast right there.
That is a whole, jeez.
But what I would say is, like, whether he was the choir director or not, the enemy definitely seems to understand the power of music, and has utilized that over the years. Now, I'll let you guys dig in this on your own. You can go down the rabbit hole and all that kind of stuff. But there are interesting connections between this so-called, I don't know what she even so calls herself, the artist Marina Abramovich.
Okay.
You know, I'm talking about the lady that does the strange, demonic art and all that kind of stuff. She is connected to a lot of the leading musicians and artists. So particularly like Jay-Z,
Lady
Beyonce,
Gaga.
Lady Gaga, all these people. And they do these weird, they do these spirit cooking sessions together that are crazy. I'll let you look that up. They do all kinds of ritual things, and they try to play it off like, oh, it's just in good fun, but it's strange.
It's dark.
Very dark.
Dark-sided.
And so there's actually a lot out there that would take us afield. Yeah.
And I think it's coming out. People are being a lot more awakened to the gatekeepers of the industry and how they're tied to everything, the agenda, the indoctrination of young people, the World Economic Forum, and satanic worship in entertainment. And you made me think of this quote. Who was that says, Give me the songs of a nation.
Yeah.
I care not who writes its laws.
Yes. I forget
The
who
songs
that was,
have been what's coming out in Hollywood. In fact, songs today, some of the lyrics, I remember asking you, because the production is so awesome and so moving. Can you sing about this? Is this legal? Because when I was young, I think they'd be at your doorstep and they poll your social media after the fact when a crime has been committed. What about the songs we're making these days? What about that? But yeah, I do think that more and more we're seeing that it is common to see satanic activity in the industry.
It's becoming more in your face, and I think
it's more
it has been like you had like code breakers. 20 years ago at the Super Bowl, they're like, "Hey, this means this,"
right?
And there were satanic like symbology going on back then.
No doubt.
But what's new, I think, is like you said, that it's the overt expression. Like they're not trying to now hide it. It's like it's so in your face.
It's in the artwork. It's on the cover of the picture. It's like, this means Satan, Baal worship, and things like that. And so, I think. Yeah,
and they're saying it like Beyonce's latest record. Some of her stuff that she said about the scripture, using it. I won't even repeat it.
Yeah, it's hard to repeat. It's just dark sided.
Yeah, you had that, and then in the song itself, "Unholy," which is another right. Mm-hmm. Now they're kind of playing specifically off terms like "holy." This is unholy, and they're celebrating it. Kim Petras is actually a man who supposedly had a sex change at the age of 16.
Okay.
And he's, dressed like a woman in the cage and all this kind of stuff. In the second verse, he sings about Balenciaga.
Oh, boy.
And that's that brand that was just discovered to be, putting stuff out about pedophilia, praising that. So all these elements, you should see them as connected. And I just think it was so fitting that Pfizer came up right after that. I'm still old enough to remember when they said that, oh man, those crazy people, 17th letter of the alphabet, talking about some kind of, pedophilia and occult activity. Those are some crazy people, and they might be crazy people. But either way, like the idea that elites are involved in this Epstein Island stuff, like this stuff is like it's right there now. It's no longer hidden.
It's in your face.
It's in your face. It's like it's connected. So, what do we do with it? The one reaction might be just to shrug it off. I've seen some people say, well, we expect the world to be the world, right? And so I'm not really so worried about that because they're just obeying their father below. While I get that, I do think that's an expression of what we've been trying to work against here, which is separatist pietism.
Oh boy.
And so that's basically, the idea we're going to retreat from taking ground in the culture and transformation of culture into our enclaves of ecclesiastical, we're, just the church. Like Jesus is Lord of my heart, my church, and that's it. Outside of that, it's all going down. We're just trying to, rescue as many souls as we can on the way down. But that pietistic attitude, I think, falls short of the full implications of the gospel as taught in the Bible, where we go out, we announce Jesus is King, not just my heart, but King over all. And He has come to the sweep of redemption is as broad as the sweep of sin, and we're supposed to, like leaven, be salt and light, and have transformation. One person said it well. They said, the culture around us is the report card of the church.
Oh boy.
So if that's the case, we can see we're getting a big fat red F right now, right?
Yeah.
And so, this should make us pause. So one thing we can get from it is, okay, Satan is real. The occultic activity seems to be coming into the forefront. Yeah. How is that connected how do we get from secular materialism to that? Maybe we'll probably have to wait till another episode to trace that, because it'd take too long here. But what does this say about the church's activity in America? Does this help us give a diagnosis? Is this the inevitable outworking of the pietistic faith that we have retreated into since the early 1900s? And I would say, yeah, it is. Like this is what happens when you cease to carry the implications of the gospel to all of society, the economy, education, the arts, everything. And we basically hand over these structures to the enemy. It gets full-fledged. And you have drag queen story hour, and they're getting in there. Like, the downside of this is, like, most of us with sense can look at it and laugh at it and dismiss it and say, this is foolishness, this is terrible, this is garbage. But what happens with the culture that's being informed by that doesn't have strong Christian parents? That becomes normal to them. We were having a conversation with a lady who, love this person. They were just talking about their kids, and they were saying how we were talking about this topic, and they said, "Oh yeah, my kids see, they see gay people kids, and it ain't no big deal to them. They're like whatever." And the thought in that statement was that it almost like it was a good thing that they don't have the old hang-ups that we have. And see, that is the mentality. They're trying to normalize all this stuff so much that the kids grow up and they don't bat an eye. They see this stuff and they think it's normal and good. And that is to their destruction and to the complete destruction of all society.
Good. That's really good.
If you want to grow in your confidence in knowing what you believe and why you believe it, if you want to ground your faith in biblical Christianity and step into who God has called you to be, I want to tell you about a great program put on by Impact 360, and it's called Propel. Propel is a one-week transformational leadership and discipleship experience where high school students gather together to be grounded in a biblical worldview as they learn how to follow Jesus, have a godly influence, learn how to disciple their peers, and boldly live out their faith in their daily lives. So they're having 2 sessions this summer. The first one is June 19th through the 25th, and the second one is June 26th through July 2nd. These programs fill up really quickly, and I promise you will not be disappointed. So we'll put the link below if you're interested in looking into it, and we'll see you this summer.
And that normalization of sexual anarchy, of occultic activity, of all those things is Satanism from the beginning. Like, if you look back to the Babylonian times, these things are always connected, and Joe Boot does that. He goes through and connects these things. And shows how this has been the history. You have sexual anarchy that goes with the occult, abortion, child murder that goes with the occult.
Wow.
All these things go hand in hand, and so that we can dismiss it, but we also have to be aware. Okay, this is what's going on, and this is what's being accepted now.
Not only accepted, I saw on YouTube once a church that was studying and doing a study on Beyonce worship. Like doing a literal study to enhance worship diversity in their church. And I also saw, you're seeing it like drag queens in the church be invited to come and teach and preach to congregants. And not only are we separatist pietists, we are abdicating biblical principles, turning altogether from the standard of the gospel of the word.
No, you're right. And that's why, this attempt, so one way that it's talked about sometimes is we have split things into sacred and secular, or an upper story and a lower story. And the church said, well, you can have the lower story. You can have all the earth stuff, and we'll take the upper story.
Okay.
Right? And now what they don't realize is inevitably that lower story is going to come and push out everything of the upper story and take over there as well. We can't retreat, and the sacred space gets smaller and smaller and smaller. And the state becomes larger and larger and larger.
Becomes God, yeah.
And that's inevitably what happened. That's why there's this connection between Jill Biden getting up at the Grammys and Pfizer.
Oh, yeah.
And all these things. Like, this is worldview in action.
Wow.
And so if you can't act like you can get out of the culture war and that we can protect this safe space around Christianity. It doesn't work like that. Jesus is Lord of all. Like, it's either Christ or chaos.
Wow.
There's no neutral ground where you can kind of sit and protect that. And I think that's what, if anything, this was the exposure of that to the maximum level. So while we might laugh at the shock value, I think we have to take seriously the fact that after that performance, or it was sometime during the Grammys, and the lady got up there, or maybe it was a man. I can't remember which one it was, but they got up there and basically gave a transgender right. This is the first transgender.
Yeah.
And the saddest part about that was the response of the
Cheers.
audience, the cheers. Because that, I mean, again, it's people, and it's people at the Grammys, so that is a small. I don't think it represents the whole of America, thankfully. But to hear that cheer, I think that represents a good swath of our culture right now.
Yeah.
Even young kids in the church that when they're not trained, like teenagers we come across, that haven't been challenged and taught worldview, they're gonna think, oh yeah, that's a good thing. Oh man, that the victim, they're winning now. We've gotten rid of those old oppressive, cisgender, hegemonic powers. And that's what I want to say. There were many Christians that I saw like thinking, well, it's no big deal. Who cares? The big thing is what's going on in the church. And that is true too. Like the fact that we're not training up and discipling, that is probably priority wise, that's a bigger deal than what goes on at the Grammys. But I do, just as a thought experiment, imagine that someone got up there, because this can let you know how we've even been infiltrated, or indoctrinated.
Gotcha.
So if someone, let's imagine someone literally got up there and they did an ode to the KKK. And they came up on stage dressed in the hoods, and they were like killing it, and it was a great song, and they got off, and
oh my God.
And at the end they sacrificed somebody. Ooh. Like did a visual sacrifice of a brown person, right?
Yeah.
And then they get up afterwards and receive the reward, the award, and they say, yes, now this I'm so glad to get up here and to be able to show you that we will take it back as the white race, da 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 da. What would your response be to that? Yeah. Especially if the crowd cheered. I think we would be mortified, right? Yeah. And we would immediately feel like I guarantee you every Big Eva representative would have been shouting that thing down. They'd have been posting, and rightfully so.
Absolutely.
But I did notice Big Eva didn't want to really want to come against the Satan performance. They wanted to downplay it and say, oh, it's not a big deal. What's really a big deal is this. So what does that let you know? That lets you know that we've even been impacted a little bit by this woke movement.
No doubt.
To downplay sexual anarchy and to make racial partiality
the number one sin in the country.
Right. And so, just that little thought experiment can let you know, like, it's good to kind of challenge yourself to think through that. Both of those scenarios are really wicked.
Yeah, evil.
And we can fight against the wickedness of that song, this, unholy song, without looking crazy. We don't have to set our hair on fire and run around. But we do need to stand up and speak out against that. And then we also need to get in our churches and train kids up so that that's not even attractive to them. And they see it for what it is. Like, they see the ugliness for ugliness. And because we really haven't done either one of those really well, I think you do get these people wanting to bifurcate the two. So real quick, I just want to read a couple passages from this gospel culture. Let me pull this up. If you're watching, you can follow along.
Yeah, you won't see any protest on Spotify to take down Unholy from the church.
Yes, you know what I'm saying?
But I've heard people say that the LGBTQ is petitioning for Natural Woman by Aretha Franklin to be taken off of Spotify because it's offensive.
Yeah.
So, you make a good point, love.
Yeah, it's just good to check that out. So
to process that. Okay.
Here's this book, Gospel Culture, Living in God's Kingdom, Cornerstones, Volume 1. Now, again, like, if you want to go on the Mud Hymn Mama, you can go here to all MHMM products. Click on this magnifying glass right here. And what did I say that book was called, babe?
Gospel Culture or something?
Gospel Culture. Type that in there.
Something like that.
And it pulls up right here, Gospel Culture, Living in God's Kingdom. Click on that, and you'll see you can get it right there for $6.15.
That's a great price.
You support a good cause here. You get your free mind discount. So, anyways, let's go back over here to our Kindle book, and I just want to read. Let me me pop forward. The English words culture and agriculture are derived from a Latin word colere and are related to cultus or worship. The direct association of culture with worship is most noticeable in our ongoing use of the word cult for various religions. Culture is perhaps best understood as the public manifestation of the religious ground motive, i.e., worship of a people. The religious ground motive of a culture can never be ascertained from the ideas and the personal faith of the individual. It is truly a communal motive that governs the individual, even when one is not consciously aware of it or acknowledges it. In the West today, I'm kind of skipping around here, just some bullet points I highlighted, but in the West today, we increasingly experience a humanistic, secular culture deeply influenced by pagan spirituality, which at the same time displays the cultural vestiges of Christianity. That's that Jesus-haunted, biblically illiterate, universe here. But here we go. Henry Van Til thus accurately defined culture as religion externalized.
Wow.
Religion externalized. All culture is the expression of a people's worship in terms of which they cultivate their society.
That's
so
deep.
What you take to be the ultimate God, that's why you can't get outside of moral proclamations. Like, for instance, Vice, I hesitate to even call them a news organization, but they're a journalism rag. But basically they said, conservatives rage about this, and they were trying to downplay the Sam Smith performance. And they were basically calling conservatives, moral pearl clutchers, that kind of deal. But if you were to say anything that's politically incorrect, you better believe Vice would be the ones running around their hair on fire. So again, we don't have to clutch our pearls. We can be steady and just strong in our pronouncements and clear. But we call evil, evil, and good, good, while they don't have a leg to stand on. So going back to this here, culture making is inescapable for all God's image bearers. It is an expression of worship. Culture is what human beings make of God's creation. It's what we do with God's creation. We are either oriented toward God or toward idolatry in marriage, family, church, state, art, science, and every other sphere. We will either seek to serve and glorify God in each area of our life, or our lives will have an apostate direction with no central place for God and his revelation. So here, real quick, the transformation of culture. In view of all this, it is clear that implicit in the Christian gospel is a particular vision of culture. Indeed, the gospel is a culture because it is centered on the worship of the living God through Jesus Christ and the enthronement of Christ as Lord over the heart, mind, soul, and strength of every believer. That the gospel forms a new culture is thus an inescapable deduction from the meaning of both terms. If culture is the public expression of the worship of a people, and the gospel restores man to true worship, i.e. of the Creator, not the creation, then the gospel restores man to true culture, which is the kingdom of God. Man was not made to live a fragmented and dissonant life, but was made an integral being to worship and glorify God and have dominion under God in all things. Wow. The gospel fully restores man to his calling to worship and to serve, beginning with the regeneration of the heart of man, and thereby effecting a radical change in the core of man's being.
Love that. Wow.
One last little part here. It is only by believing in God that we can ever criticize the government. Abolish God and the government becomes the God. That fact is written across all human history. Whatever the people do not believe in something beyond the world, they will worship the world. But above all, they will worship the strongest thing in the world. So that's how all this comes together. Any thoughts on all that, babies? You hear that?
That's just clear. It's like, it's not whether you'll worship God. It's like, which God are you going to worship? It's
exactly.
Like, if it's not the God of the universe.
In the end of that path, this is how it goes from you start with a little idolatry, right?
Okay.
You put, you worship sex or you worship, technology. It eventually leads to full on a cult. Because you're really, idolatry is inevitably witchcraft. It leads you towards witchcraft in the fullest expression.
Wow.
Whereas the other side leads you toward more godliness. One more little paragraph here. Since the gospel effects such a great transformation, We must conclude that the dreary condition of our culture today is in large measure due to the apostasy of the church and Christian family from their respective callings. Since the so-called Enlightenment, Christians have steadily surrendered the various organs of culture, education, law, arts, charity, medicine, government, almost entirely to the increasingly humanistic state. We have progressively retreated into a pietistic bubble concerned largely with eternal verities and keeping souls from hell, and we have faithlessly limited Christ's jurisdiction to the institutional church.
Wow.
The result has been the marginalization of the Christian church and a change of religion in the public sphere. That's important. The result of that has been the marginalization of the Christian church and a change of religion in the public sphere.
Yeah.
See, we changed religions without people, maybe, and I think some people were noticing. You had J. Gresham Machen back in the day, one of the Princeton greats, who was calling this stuff out. But that happened without many people even noticing it. Some freedoms for the gospel remained, though threatened, but history shows that freedoms not fought for are soon forfeited. If we love God and our neighbor, then a full-orbed gospel culture for all of life will be of great importance to us, not simply our inner piety. We will want to witness to the reality of our cosmos-renewing gospel and call people and nations to repentance and the life, joy, beauty, and truth that is found in Jesus Christ and his rule alone.
Ooh, amen.
Right?
Amen.
One more thing I want to address, just because I had one more. I know we're
Okay.
short on time here. We had one of our listeners comment on Mav City at the Grammys, and that's a whole nother episode
Yes,
too.
it is.
But after this person did that, I saw another individual came on, and they were real excited on Facebook because Brandon Lake said the name of Jesus.
Okay.
Right.
Okay,
Let me just, I'll make a brief comment, and if you guys want us to do a further episode, let me know. There's a lot we could talk about there. But let me just type this in, Maverick City Grammy speech, and see if I can find that one. Yeah, here it is. Here, babe, I'll play it. I don't think you
Alright.
saw this yet.
I
but-
haven't seen it. Okay.
significant places. And so I just want to say we finished it over text, and it's just so cool. We rallied the team together, finished this song, and it's been awesome in a season where the world is riddled with fear. We know that perfect love casts out all fear, and that perfect love is Jesus Christ. And so if you're dealing with that, man, turn to Jesus. We want to encourage you. Y'all team, I'm proud of you, love you.
So in essence, that's, I don't know if you heard what he said there, but, so I think the person on Facebook, they were downplaying, they were basically saying, who cares about the Satan thing? He said the name of Jesus on the Grammys. Now, that's all, it's cool. Like, I appreciate that. He said that, I don't want to criticize Brandon Lake at all, because that's better than a lot of folks would do. But I think to think of that as a major victory is to be down 49-7 in a football game and run a 5-yard play and think, oh man, look at that, we ran a 5-yard play. And the reason I say that is this: the battle right now, the enemy's battle is not centered around you saying Jesus can help you overcome fear and anxiety in your life.
Preach. Yeah.
Can Jesus help you overcome fear and
Absolutely.
anxiety? For sure. But you can see how that kind of ambiguous language can actually sit well in their worldview, which is this kind of pluralistic, like whatever helps you therapeutically, right? If that's
Jesus
yoga,
is therapy, yeah.
if that's Jesus, like we all have this fear and anxiety. If you turn to Jesus, he'll help you. Oh, that's cool. I turn to the occult for that.
Yeah, tack him on to this night, and let him co-sign this whole
So there's an
thing.
interesting story. I won't
Okay.
mention the apologist's name because they've since shamed themselves. But,
Okay.
But they used to tell the story. They were overseas and they were telling the gospel, and the translator began to add on a lot of words, and people started leaving. And so they looked at the translator and said, "Why are you doing that?" And he said, "Well, these people here in their religion, they thought that you were just saying add Jesus on to their deities, and they were fine with that. But I was explaining to them, no, he is the Son of God, and you have to accept him alone and reject the others." And that's when they started leaving. See, that was where the rub was. That was the point of friction between the biblical worldview and their worldview. It was fine so long as you kind of left it kind of like, just add Jesus on.
Yeah.
So what I say to that, it's not a bad thing, and I'm not criticizing him for saying that, but here's another thought experiment. Imagine if he got up there and he said, I just want to thank Jesus, the Logos, through whom was created male and female.
Ooh.
Through whom was brought into being the institution of marriage, which is between one man and one woman for life, as a covenant. Through whom was given the law, including do not murder. And I tell you today, for those of you who are supporting killing unborn human beings in the womb, turn to Jesus and repent, and his wrath will be taken from you. Turn to Jesus and put your confidence in him as the Lord and the creator of all these norms that you've been trying to undermine. See, that's where the battle is. And it won't do to simply, like, this is the old thing where, like, we're in the NFL and we say, yay, Jesus at the end of the game. Like that's 1992. It is the same battle, but we should be experiencing now, or we should be more experienced in understanding the nature of the battle. Yeah. And we talked about this a couple episodes. It's the Tao that's under attack, and they're happy to give you this privatized pietistic Christianity. They're not going to respond to that. Like, I haven't heard any pushback on that, but I guarantee you, had he said any of the things I just said, we'd be hearing, like, he would be canceled right now. Mav City would be canceled.
Grammys taken away.
All that. So that is what that's kind of where I want to end that. But I do want to say this, like, there are other problems there. This person brought up, like, they were going to go to their show in New York City and Maverick City. You had to be vaccinated to get in, for instance. Any Christian artist that was allowing that to happen, I get it. Their unions were putting pressure on them probably and all this kind of stuff. But, we cannot do that as Christian artists. We can't get into that kind of stuff. This person said they got on their website. Hopefully this is a feature of the website and not them, but to sign up for the text message list for them, it asks you which gender you were, and it had multiple options. So if anybody from Mav City's listen, fix that. So there's lots of other stuff there to be talked about at another date. But anything else you want to add before we hop on?
Yeah, and I just think that it just breaks my heart to think of that they, quote unquote, represent the worship movement or leaders of our day. Not in essence, but this is what young people are looking to. They had the #1 tour last year, grossing more than any other tour, and worship is divorced from worldview and lifestyle and truly understanding the times we're living in. So we got to look past titles. We got to look past all the hype and even notoriety of everybody on platforms today and look past that and see through, okay, how are people really living? How are they really thinking? And are they really living for Christ in these times? Because that's just... That's deep, love, what you just brought up. That's awesome.
Yeah. And I think you're right. And that's even outside of stuff that, like, there's drama going on, and people talk about that. I don't know all the ins and outs of that. But I do want to say this, like, insofar as you have a platform, like, there are times we do have to kind of go in like ninja sheep and go in under the radar, but just know the direction you're going. And know that that's not sufficient to kind of like, we can't camp out forever on this kind of pietistic Jesus therapy place where it's just one among many, where our main thing is just to be nice and winsome and fit in with the world, to have a place at the table. Like, no, it's a war between the seed of the woman, the seed of the serpent. We can be strategic in that, but we have to know what the battle is, and we have to continually work toward bringing people to the truth and cutting through the evil. We have to know where the battle is and not flinch at that place.
That's good.
So anyways, thank you guys so much. Subscribe if you can. Help us get the word out, and we'll see you next time.